Let's look back at some of the some over the years here, and again, the time sure has flied. Almost immediately, you weren't Bruce Spunlin when you were sworn in, but a month into your term, you're away in Florida, and the call comes in the middle of the night, station Nightclub fire in West Warwick. A lot of people still, to this day, think that even though that was very early in your administration, was among your finest moments, leading the state through that dark hour. Maybe you could take us back a little bit. When that call came in, you of course immediately came back to Rhode Island, and oversaw the effort to get through that terrible time.
Yeah, that was awful. It was an absolute nightmare for all the families that were affected, and then indirectly for the whole state, Bill. It's one of those things you sort of never get the images out of your mind. One of the things as a corollary, I remember right after the election, they have a new governor's orientation. I went to it. It's run by the National Governors Association. I didn't want to go. I said, no time for this, but it was a weekend, and people said, no, you really should do it. One of the first things that outgoing governors are counseling new governors, they said, you got to appoint a head of emergency management. That wasn't even on my list, if you know what I mean. I was thinking of putting it together, a whole administration and budgets and all the things you got to do. And I also knew we had Reggie Centracchio at the time, Adjutant General, good organization there, but I hadn't even thought about that. And then this governor said, guaranteed, the reason he was saying this, guaranteed within your first 6 months of taking office, something's going to happen. Whether it be floods, whether it be wildfires in California, blizzards, something's going to happen in your state, and you will be judged for most of your term, frankly, on how that gets handled.
And this was how long before the fire?
This was right after the election in November.
Right after the election.
And they said within 6 months. It was 6 weeks. It was 6 weeks. And we had taken no time off during the campaign, and so we've just taken a week to go down to Florida, and our children were coming down, and we had taken them up to Disney World and came back to the condo at about 11 o'clock at night, getting the kids settled, and I got the call. And from my chief of staff who said, Governor, there's been a bad fire. And I said, well, how bad? And I knew the building when he described it. That used to be an Italian restaurant when our kids were young. We used to go there. And he said, well, it could be, as many as 20, 30 people. And he was on his way there. So I said, well, call me as soon as you get there. And so he called me about midnight, 12:30, and said this could be worse. And so I said, well, you got to get me out of here. And the Florida State Police, and they were great, everybody. The first flight I could get out, they got me to the airport and got me here. And we lost 100, and it was like unbelievable. And having gone to the site as you did, and many Rhode Islanders did, and actually I was there, they were still, recovering people that had perished, and your heart just broke. And I met with the families. You recall all the families were at the Crown Plaza, and there was a lot of confusion early on because information was coming out and they were getting, and so I went over there and made a promise. I said, I'm going to come here twice a day, in the morning and at night, and I'll tell you exactly the status of everything. And so I said, if you don't hear it from me, then don't believe anything, because I will tell you exactly where we are and what's going on. And I did that. So it was very, very difficult time. And as I said, your heart breaks for the people that were affected, and so many. I mean, Sue and I visited the hospitals, those that survived. Questions, they were there with friends, lost friends, why did they survive? Those kinds of questions they were asking themselves. And, very hard. All you could say is, listen, you survived for a reason.
What do you think that we learned from that as a result? There have been those that say maybe at least regulatory, that we maybe went a little bit too far. But we can debate that. What did you learn as a person and as a governor, and what do you think that
the first thing that I learned, that there were more of these kinds of venues, these sort of clubs that were in existence where they were just mostly music and alcohol. lots of people jammed in, and I said, wait a minute, you know, how many of these do we have, and what do we have in terms of exits? You know, what kind of controls do we have on the number of people in there, et cetera? That's why I called, if you recall, I said immediately, we got to do a whole inventory of places like that, and get an assessment of those and figure out what needed to be done. And the fire marshal and his team did that. And, you know, coming out of that were lots of issues about exits, accessibility to the exits, and then that grew into, over time, the legislature moving in terms of much broader, you know, fire control measures and new statutes and so forth. And, you know, and I think in some respects it might have gone too far. You know, the new church in North Kingstown, if I look up there and I see pipes for sprinklers up there, and I say, well, you know, the chances of there being fires in churches like that where there's not, you know, they may have a candle burning are slim. And you get that kind of criticism, but I think at the time there was such a strong feeling that we needed to get control of this and we needed to have better standards in place. And I think particularly for venues like that, because when they told me how many people were in there, I said, wait a minute, I was in there with my family. That's just a little building, you know, and a wood frame to start with. And I'm sure over years the floor is saturated with grease and oil, et cetera. So it was, you know, it was a terrible circumstance, you know, waiting for an awful event, which is the pyrotechnics that set it off.
Well, you did get high points for that. You know, I wonder, though, in that terrible year, 2003, if you felt I should never leave town. Because as you recall, a couple in the summer of that year, you know, we had the issue with the Narragansetts, and again, you were. Yeah, so you must have felt to yourself, boy, I can't ever get a break in this town here. You know, it's every time I leave, I've got somebody on the phone to me.
Well, some people, you know, started saying, "Governor, you better not leave." But I think that, you know, it's the nature of the job too, Bill. The reality is, I think, Governor, you've seen with the oil spill in the Gulf, Katrina. You've seen the wildfires in California. The reality is that, you know, these things happen. You hope to God the kind of thing like the Station Nightclub never happens. But natural disasters occur. You know, I've been saying for the 8 years I've been in office, we didn't have a hurricane plan well developed when I came in. And we spent a lot of time and effort on that because I lived through Hurricane Carol in '54, and I know the devastation. And I keep telling our people we're due, we're overdue.
Well, we did see that. I mean, we
got ready for one this last year.
Well, we got ready for it, and we certainly had historic flooding in you know, in the Patuxent the Patuxent Valley that we had never. I don't know about you, but I can't get the images out of my mind where the water. I mean, literally over the median of the interstate. 200-year
floods. And when I said the only reason they came up with 200 years because they have 100-year floodplain maps. Then they have 500-year. They don't have 200. But so it was somewhere. It was worse than a 100-year flood, and so yeah, these things happen. And you know, and when you're in this job, the citizens expect you to be, you know, on top of it and doing everything you can to mitigate the damages. What are
your thoughts in the aftermath of what happened in Charlestown with the Narragansetts? That was a no-win situation. A lot of people would suggest that was it was a no-win situation. A group with tribal sovereignty and going ahead and doing something, and an equal reaction coming from the state.
Yeah, that's one of those things you'd hope would not evolve the way it did. All right, clearly opening the smoke shop was illegal. That was upheld. The court said that. We knew that, all right? And it needed to be stopped. You know, my hope at the time was it could have been stopped without the altercation that occurred, because that did nothing except really, you know, inflame tensions. It made, put the state police in an awkward position to look like their job is to enforce the law. They're not trying to bully. So it was really very unfortunate. That's not what I wanted to happen, and as we talked about what needed to be done, you know, there were hopes that it could be managed peacefully, quietly, just put an end to it, and unfortunately it got out of hand. Fortunately, no one got hurt badly, because if something worse had happened, I think we all would have felt, you know, really much worse about it. So, but it was one of those things that I didn't want to happen the way it played out. Mm-hmm. Nobody did, but you know, given the tensions at the time, it did. It happened.
A lot of people had thought the real issue behind the issue at the time was a casino, and we did have a casino proposal, and we had another vote, and as of now, right now, Rhode Island's still a no-go on a casino. I guess that debate's going to continue probably long after you leave office here. That's there's been a lot of talk about gambling throughout your time as governor.
Yeah, it has. You're absolutely right, and part of it was fueled by the Narragansetts, because when they look across into Connecticut and they see the two tribes there that are operating, and I understand their feeling as though this is something they wanted to see here. It finally got put to the voters, and the voters said no. We already have two venues, if you will, that are gambling sites. And I think you're absolutely right. The issue, I think, now that we've gotten Twin River, because out of bankruptcy, which was my biggest concern, because it's a large source of revenue to the state. So when that got into financial difficulties because they just borrowed more money than they can afford, you know, I was concerned that we get that under control, get through the bankruptcy, get it back out, and in the meantime, not have any adverse effect on the state. And the truth is, everybody's forgotten, we've actually come through the last couple of years through that turmoil, and in fact, the revenues coming out of Twin River have been steady and actually up a little bit.
It's now out of bankruptcy.
And now it's out of bankruptcy. The issue going forward, you're absolutely right, Bill. I think it's if Massachusetts, and this is the big if Massachusetts moves, you know, aggressively with some kind of casinos, then it's going to be very difficult not to look at expanding Twin River and possibly Newport Grand, you know, with more table game type things. That's a vote the citizens will have to make, but there's no question if Massachusetts caves, it's going to have a significant impact, particularly Twin River. You know, I was hopeful over the years that Massachusetts would not, because once Massachusetts caves, then believe me, Vermont and New Hampshire and Maine will be right after them. And then all you're going to have is casinos in every state.
Probably have some casinos going out of business too.
Yeah, because each casino then is only going to be dealing with, or really being frequented by their own citizens. And so this whole debate that Rhode Island is going to Connecticut, and now Massachusetts saying, well, Massachusetts residents going to Rhode Island, we got to keep them back home. Soon, every state will be just, you know, frequented, as I said, each casino by their own citizens. And gambling's not a growth. It's not economic development. I think of it as a voluntary tax. You know, you and I can choose to go there, knowing that a share of what we put on the table and lose is going to go to the state. So you can argue, okay, it's a tax, but it's a voluntary tax. You don't have to go. But at the end of the day, it is not economic development. It is not bringing wealth into a community. It's not like manufacturing something, making a product, selling it somewhere else, bringing that money back, and you hire people and you invest it in the community, etc. All that gambling is doing is taking money that's already here, recycling it amongst winners and losers in the state, and the owners taking a piece off the top.
Hear it, and see it when you want it. On demand, audio and video at 630WPRO.com.